Thanks to you, I'm marrying Rich. As a thank you, I'll give you as much alimony as you want. My sister said this to me with a triumphant look. It was shocking enough to be betrayed by my husband, but to discover that his mistress was my own sister was unimaginable. Since we were kids, she always took things from me. Whether it was snacks, toys, or even my favorite stuffed animal, she would take them. Despite our parents' repeated warnings, she never changed. In high school, she even tried to steal my boyfriend, leading to a huge fight. As adults, I naturally distanced myself from her. Unlike her, who bragged about marrying Rich without pursuing further education, I went to college and found a job. Through my company, I met and married my husband, who was already a CEO. Due to past experiences, I made sure my sister didn't meet my husband until our wedding day. As expected, she caused a scene at our wedding, unable to bear the thought of her sister marrying Rich. My parents had to intervene and she was escorted out of the venue. Although my husband and sister never met for a while, as time passed, they happened to meet again by chance. This encounter gave them the opportunity to develop an intimate relationship. I was dumbfounded by both her audacity to pursue another woman's husband and his willingness to stray. My sister believed my husband had an annual income of $2 million, but in reality, he had been dismissed from his CEO position due to negligence and was unemployed. Unaware of the truth, my sister seemed on the verge of bursting into triumphant laughter, believing she had gotten everything she wanted. However, the situation changed dramatically the moment she heard the lawyer's words. It's not an income of $2 million, but a debt of $2 million. What? She had taken everything from me, thinking she was entering a dream life. But instead, she faced a nightmare. I am Amy Brown, a 33-year-old working at a design company for almost 11 years. When I first joined, the company had fewer than 10 employees. Everyone, including the CEO, was involved in all aspects of the business. I used to do field visits during the day and handle invoices and subcontractor orders in the evening. The end of the month was particularly busy, but it was fulfilling. The company's performance improved, and after 3 years, we established a subsidiary, led by the CEO's younger brother, Matt Brown. He joined the subsidiary as president upon his request, having worked elsewhere before. Through interactions with the subsidiary, I grew close to Matt and soon started dating him. We got married after 6 months of dating. I resigned to become a full-time housewife. For the first year, I devoted myself to household chores while my husband, enjoying his status as president, often skipped work. I warned him several times, but he always made excuses, saying his brother would handle any problems, and continued his lazy lifestyle. Desperate, I consulted my brother-in-law more than once or twice. When my brother-in-law admonished him, my husband would work seriously for a while. However, this never lasted long, and he would soon return to his usual sluggish way of life. After about a year of this, my brother-in-law suggested I return to work. Valuing my previous performance, he offered me a position as a secretary. I discussed it with my husband, who was indifferent, so I decided to return to work. I've always been career-driven. I felt unfulfilled as a housewife. The executives at my brother-in-law's company, familiar faces all, were happy to have me back. Working as my brother-in-law's secretary, I learned that my husband's subsidiary was in dire straits. Despite his assurances, it was deep in the red, with performance steadily declining. In collaboration with my brother-in-law, I tried to revive my husband's company, but it was too late. The company's performance was in such a bad state that it was difficult to return it to its former level. Despite the company's impending collapse, my husband remained nonchalant. My love for him was fading, but I held on to the hope that he would eventually reform. However, my expectations were misplaced, and our marriage, like his company, began its own countdown to collapse. Even as the company faltered, my husband's habits didn't change. He would arrive at the office late, delegate all his work to the employees, and spend his days surfing the internet. Many employees left the company due to his attitude. I tried repeatedly to persuade him to turn things around, but he wouldn't listen, dismissing my concerns because I wasn't the president. Even showing him the financial statements, illustrating the debts and declining sales, didn't help. He ignored warnings of potential bankruptcy. Finding the situation unmanageable, I consulted my brother-in-law. Previously, my husband would change his behavior temporarily after a reprimand from him. But now he wouldn't even listen to his own brother. My brother-in-law, along with the company's consultant accountant, tried everything possible, but the outlook was bleak. Despite my brother-in-law's personal efforts to salvage the company, my husband refused to change his ways. My brother-in-law went from anger to utter disbelief at my husband's irresponsibility, ignoring repeated warnings and advice from both of us. My husband continued to neglect the business. My brother-in-law, realizing the subsidiary's recovery was improbable, consulted with a lawyer and decided to proceed with bankruptcy. However, concerned about the employees, he decided to transfer the company's executives to his own company and helped other employees with transfers or finding new jobs. My husband expected to work as an executive in my brother-in-law's company, but life is not so lenient. Find a job on your own and start over, my brother-in-law told him coldly. Furthermore, personal debts incurred by my husband were discovered at this time. He had been trading stocks at home and had accumulated significant debt from gambling. I was nearly faint when I heard the total debt was $2 million. Despite this, my husband showed no remorse, blaming my brother-in-law for not employing him and even attempting to access my personal savings. My love for him had completely vanished. I can't count how many times I thought about divorce. However, my relationship with my brother-in-law, for whom I work as a secretary, held me back. I know I'm trusted by the staff and have contributed to the company, and my brother-in-law promoted me to secretary in recognition of my work. But, being the wife of his younger brother played a role in my reappointment as a secretary. I doubt such an offer would have been made if I were a stranger, regardless of my contributions. I feared that disclosing my thoughts about divorce might jeopardize my job. Torn between the desire for divorce and the fear of losing my job, I spent many sleepless nights. Meanwhile, my husband was doing nothing. He aimlessly wandered every day, leading a self-indulgent life. My husband probably thought he could rely on my earnings to get by. Furthermore, he deceptively believed that his brother-in-law would eventually cover his debts, which was completely unrealistic. As for me, my feelings towards my husband were only drifting further away. During dinner one evening, my husband mentioned meeting my sister Patty in town. My sister, the same age as my husband, is a freeter with no marriage history, constantly engaged in matchmaking, dreaming of becoming a housewife. She has lofty expectations for a partner, an annual income over $100,000, and no living with in-laws. At 43, it's unrealistic for her to find such a match. My marriage, which was quite a catch given my then-husband's near $2 million income, had always been a source of jealousy for her. My marriage was, so to speak, a match above my social standing. My sister had been insisting it was odd for the younger sister to marry first, and demanding I give up my husband, pushing these unreasonable demands onto me. When I heard that my sister and husband had met by chance, I had a bad feeling about it. There's a saying about a woman's sixth sense, and perhaps that's what I was experiencing. One day, my sister called me out, presumably to treat her to a meal. But I welcomed the chance to spend time with someone other than my husband. She appeared in youthful makeup and flashy clothes. Despite wishing she dressed more age-appropriately, we went to a nearby restaurant. While my sister and I were having a casual conversation over a meal, she suddenly said, "Divorce your husband, Matt." I couldn't believe my ears and was filled with disbelief. What was she trying to say? I was so shocked that I couldn't even speak. And then she calmly started talking about her relationship with my husband. She explained that she and my husband had started going out for meals and outings after bumping into each other in the city. Over time, they became close and apparently even developed a physical relationship, discussing their desire to be together. However, my husband was hesitant to leave me, despite wanting to be with my sister. That's why she called me, to settle things. Hearing this, I couldn't help but wonder what these two grown adults were thinking. Honestly, I felt neither anger nor sadness, just disbelief and pity. My sister, taking my silence as refusal, aggressively demanded a divorce again. Agreeing to the divorce wasn't an issue for me, but I needed to discuss it with my brother-in-law first. I promised her I'd talk with my husband that night. My sister's face brightened instantly, and she agreed readily. After parting ways with her, I returned to the office and confided in my brother-in-law about my decision to divorce. He apologized for his younger brother's failings and reassured me that my divorce had nothing to do with my job at the company. He encouraged me to do what I felt was right and reminded me that I was a valued employee, always welcome to rely on him for support. I truly appreciated the depth of my brother-in-law's kindness and found it astonishing how different two brothers could be. With his approval, I resolved to divorce my husband, feeling unable to deal with the trouble any longer. When I returned home, I found my husband lounging and watching TV. The thought that I would soon be saying goodbye to my husband strangely lifted my spirits. Dinner was ready, and my husband took his seat. I chose that moment to tell him about my conversation with my sister. He was clearly flustered. I told him what I knew about their relationship and that my sister had asked for a divorce. However, my husband insisted that he had no intention of divorcing and that my sister was speaking out of turn. I tried to clarify the facts by reconfirming whether there had been an affair. My husband hesitated for a moment, but probably realizing he couldn't escape the truth since I had already heard it from my sister. He admitted to the relationship but firmly refused to consider divorce. However, I felt that the love between them had already faded. And even though I pointed this out, my husband wouldn't listen. So, I asked him why he was so opposed to divorce. He then admitted it was because he would have no means to repay his debts. I was dumbfounded and lost for words at this revelation. Not only because of his usual attitude but also because he intended to make me shoulder his debt repayment. Realizing that further discussion was futile, I decided to leave the house the next day while my husband was still asleep. I then decided to rent a hotel room near my workplace and use it as a temporary residence. I reported the situation to my brother-in-law and got his approval to commute from there. He offered to let me stay at his house, but not wanting to inconvenience his family, I declined the offer. Instead, I consulted with him about my husband refusing to divorce. My brother-in-law immediately took out his mobile phone and made a call. A few minutes later, his phone rang. Apparently, he had asked the legal advisor of his company to find a lawyer specializing in divorce cases. The legal advisor promptly arranged everything and set up an appointment with the opposing lawyer. My brother-in-law told me it was okay to leave early and sent me off right away. I am really indebted to him. I thanked him and headed straight to the lawyer's office. I reported the current situation and expressed my desire to divorce. The lawyer immediately contacted a private detective agency to secure at least minimal evidence of the affair. A week later, he arranged for negotiations with my husband in the presence of the lawyer. I was advised not to contact my husband directly until then, but I had no intention of doing so from the start. A week later, as promised, I called my husband and sister to a cafe near my home to have a discussion. When the conversation started, my sister demanded a divorce and said she would pay compensation. My husband, who was most surprised by my sister's words, tried to persuade her, saying he couldn't pay, but my sister insisted it was okay. Eventually, my husband was overruled by my sister and agreed. My sister started saying things like she wanted to accept his feelings if he loved her that much. The lawyer and I couldn't help but smile wryly. Well, if that makes them agree to the divorce, it's great news for me. The lawyer quickly made arrangements for the divorce while they were still agreeable. The compensation involved me demanding $500,000 from my husband. Considering the division of property, my brother-in-law decided to buy the house and other properties. The sale proceeds would be split between my husband and me, with my husband's share going towards his debt repayment. There would be hardly any money left for my husband. In fact, considering the debt, it would be a significant loss. Worried, I reminded him to make sure he paid properly. Instead of my husband, it was my sister who replied with a triumphant look. Thanks to this, I'm marrying into money. As a thank you, I'll give you as much compensation as you want. She continued, saying that since my husband's annual income was $2 million, $500,000 was just a drop in the bucket. To this, my lawyer retorted, "It's not income, but a debt of $2 million. What? I still burst into laughter, remembering her expression at that moment. It was exactly like a deer in headlights. Apparently, my sister was unaware that my husband was unemployed and in debt. She asked my husband if what the lawyer said was true. My husband calmly affirmed it. My sister slumped into her chair as if her legs had given out. However, she had already signed the divorce papers and the compensation agreement. There was no way to cancel it now. My sister left the office with a soulless expression, staggering out. My husband followed her out of the office. And so, my short marriage to my husband came to an end. Afterward, it seems that my ex-husband and sister never ended up getting married. My ex-husband's parents ended up taking on his debt. My ex-husband's parents, which also means my brother-in-law's parents, decided that he would work for free at my brother-in-law's company to repay the debt. Moreover, they also covered all the compensation payments to me on behalf of my ex-husband. Furthermore, they even came to apologize to me for my ex-husband's incompetence. They said it was their fault for how they raised him, but I felt it wasn't a matter of upbringing, as my brother-in-law, raised the same way, turned out to be a very respectable person. It was a problem with my ex-husband as an individual. Regarding my ex-husband, given the amount of his debt, I think he will have to work for free for the rest of his life. As for my sister, after our parents found out about her involvement with my husband, she was disowned. My sister had always lived at home. Intending to marry my ex-husband, she had already quit her part-time job, with her dreams of a glamorous marriage shattered. My sister ended up losing everything, her home, her job, everything. But that's not all. To pay the compensation to me, she used up all her savings, and the remaining amount was covered by our parents. Now, she faces a life of working and repaying her debt to our parents, completely out of savings and kicked out of the family home. My sister was forced to live with literally nothing. Thanks to the support of my brother-in-law and his parents, the full compensation was paid after the divorce was finalized. As for me, I used the compensation to buy a slightly larger apartment near my workplace. It was a bit expensive due to its location near the station and in a safe neighborhood. But that wasn't a problem. After all, my lawyer had managed to get me $500,000 in compensation. Hiring a competent lawyer really is important for navigating a divorce advantageously, I realized once again. Of course, I still work as a secretary at my brother-in-law's company. The subsidiary went bankrupt, and there was a time when the main company was in trouble. But my brother-in-law quickly turned things around, and we are busier than ever. The staff from the subsidiary are pleased to be recognized for their work, and are performing even better than they did at the previous company. It made me realize again how much the leadership of the top affects the entire company. As for my ex-husband, he is starting from scratch as an ordinary employee. Originally, he was treated quite favorably as the company president's brother. But after a directive from my brother-in-law, the president, everyone, from the executives to other employees, is dealing with him without reserve. He spends his days being reprimanded for his mistakes. But he can't quit or escape because of the debt to his parents. My sister, on the other hand, is in an even more miserable situation. Kicked out of the family home, she apparently hops from one shared residence to another, having no permanent place to live. She can't find a steady job due to her unstable living situation and barely makes ends meet with day jobs. She can't even afford her phone bill, so she can't use matchmaking apps for dating. Well, it's a case of reaping what she sowed, so there's no room for sympathy. Though I had the unpleasant experience of being betrayed by my husband and sister, I think it all worked out for the best in the end. Sooner or later, my marriage with my husband would have ended. I'm not sure if I'll remarry, but if the right person comes along, I'll consider it then. For now, I'm just focusing on my job and enjoying my fulfilling days.